Welcome to the 2022 NNJR Driver's Ed season. And this is Bill Gilbert. I'm one of NNJR's chief instructors, and I'll be introducing the season with our first class for students. And it's always a bit of a challenge at the beginning of the season to anticipate how many brand new students we have and how many returning students. So I've got a little bit of material for each in this presentation, so bear with me on that. And the hope is that whether you're brand new to driver's ed or if you've done a number of events, that you'll find some information here that will help you have a great event at Lightning coming up in a couple of weeks, or perhaps sooner, depending on when you're watching this. So with all of that said, I'm going to dive right in. After this material, I'll have a video of a turn-by-turn of Lightning, well, a video. It'll be me speaking using photos and diagrams and so on. So I encourage you to watch that, especially if you're not familiar with Lightning. As always, we have the disclaimer here that, that driving on the track has risks, and you're taking those risks despite our best attempt to educate everyone. So for today's class, we're going to talk about the basics, and in particular, how to do the basics well on the track. We'll start with why that matters. We'll talk about what they are, and most importantly, how to improve, followed by that turn-by-turn. Now, why do we talk about the basics and why do we focus on them? Well, even if you're a skilled driver, Ross Bentley says the difference between the best and the rest is the basics, and focusing on the basics and learning them. And even for advanced drivers, as he says, the advanced stuff is just doing the basics better. And I've experienced examples of that where I've had a pro in my car do things that I do every time, but he did them so much better. And as much as I practice, I've gotten better, but there's nothing like experience. So with all that said, let's dive right in. Another way to think about the same topic is there is no single big idea about driving on track or getting better on track. It's all about putting the basics together and improving those basics and repeating them. So all that said, what are the basics? Well, here's the list: seating position, mirrors, line, vision, controls, situational awareness. Those are the ones we're going to talk about today. On that list also are consistency and learning focus. We're not going to take the time other than to briefly touch on those today. That'll be a topic for another class, but let's dive into these. Seating position, your instructor is going to work with you on this, and it's very important that you're seated properly, much closer than most people naturally sit, so that there's bend in the elbows and the knees. Mirrors have to be set correctly. The rear view mirrors, so you have good vision out the back. The side mirrors, so that you can see the side of the car, so that there's no blind spot. Most people have the mirrors adjusted incorrectly. I'm not going to walk through how to do it here today. Your instructor will help you with this. If he or she doesn't help you, ask them to make sure your mirrors are adjusted correctly. And if they're adjusted like many cars are, you have a blind spot, as you see in this diagram. If you adjust them properly, then there is no blind spot, or a much smaller one, and you won't have to be constantly worrying, well, is there a car that I just gave a pass signal? Has that car taken the pass signal or not? That sort of thing. Trust me, when I first learned this adjustment some years ago, it was definitely a eureka moment. Seating, here's some questions to ask yourself just to make sure. Are you comfortable? Can you easily see? Does the seat need to go up or down, perhaps? Can you see in those mirrors? Do you have good control with your shoes? with your hands? Do you need gloves? Those kinds of questions. Now let's talk about the line and the basics of driving on track. If you're brand new to driver's ed, then pay a lot of attention here, because these terms, which the generic term is reference points, really are important. So the line is simply the path we take around the track that you see, drawn with the arrows here. But that line is determined by reference points. The first one in a corner is the braking point, the first place where you take your foot off the gas and onto the brake pedal. Then there's a turn-in point, and we always have cones at those points to help you know where to turn in for a particular corner. Your instructor will say turn at that point. The apex is the closest you come. It's where you hit the inside of the corner, typically a curb. There's usually a cone there as well. And apexes look like a point here, but usually we run along the apex for some number of feet, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 or 15 feet. And then there's a track out point. So we're turning the car at the turn-in point after the apex. We're relaxing the wheel. We're turning less so that we can begin to accelerate. So those are the basics. And so it looks like a rhythm when we're on track. We have our foot on the floor, accelerating on a straightaway. When we come up to a corner, we get on the brake. And as we turn, we relax the brakes and turn the wheel. And then we just repeat. The amount of braking varies from corner to corner, but the technique or the steps and the technique are all the same. So if you are getting used to learning a track, you should study the track map so that you know which corner is coming up next. So if you're brand new to Lightning, I encourage you to study the track map and the numbers so that you know what the corners look like and kind of what the numbers are. There are some names as well. If you have more experience, then you should have developed a better mental picture so you can describe each corner. You can mentally picture each corner and talk yourself all the way around the track. That's this mental picture. Can I visualize it? If you're new to DE, don't worry too much about this. This is something that comes with experience. But if you've been to Lightning a few times, you should already have this mental picture of each corner. And if you don't, do some practice in your mind, look at some videos so that you get a clearer mental picture. If you have some experience, then, am I using the full width of the track? Am I consistent in each corner? Am I hitting those reference points, in a consistent fashion? If you're new, don't worry about those things. Your instructor will help you with those. Now, here's why those reference points are important and why that mental picture is important. Obviously a curve is defined by 3 points, but this relates to our eyes. We really have to see the whole corner. And when we see the whole corner, then we have confidence on how to drive it. So if we think about those cones that were up earlier, they define, 2 straight lines, not a curve, but we want in our mind's eye, we want to picture the curve, not the straight lines. When you're brand new, your tendency is to drive point to point, and that's okay. But as we get more experience, we want to translate that into a smooth curve. And speaking of vision, I'm not going to dive into vision. Again, another topic for a whole presentation in itself, which we will do later in the season. But here's the basics of how our eyes and our brain work. We have an area of focus that's literally what it is, but it's a small area. We have our peripheral vision. We have a glance. We glance for very briefly, and then we have this mental picture I've already mentioned. So what that looks like in practice, coming up to a typical corner here, the focus is the purple or pink that you see. The driver here is in the braking zone, not to the turn-in point yet, but in the braking zone, hard on the brakes, and is focused at the apex. In other words, that's where he or she is spending the most time with their vision. But they've glanced ahead to that yellow circle, so they know that the exit of the corner is clear and there's nothing that they need to worry about at that point. And they're going to pick up the turn-in point out of their peripheral vision. They're not going to focus on that. Their peripheral vision will tell them when they're at the turn-in point and it's time to turn the steering wheel. And of course, they have this mental picture of the line through the corner. So this is an important concept for how your vision should work when you're on track. We want to be looking ahead. We want to be focusing at least one reference point ahead and using our peripheral vision to pick up the nearby points. So let's talk about controls. You're going to hear your instructor use words like wind and unwind when it pertains to the steering. You're going to hear words like squeeze when it comes to the gas pedal. With the brakes, you're going to hear release or relax. That's because use of controls should never be hurried. We never want to be in a rush in the car unless it's an emergency. We want to have the hands in the right place. We want to have our feet actually in the right place, but particularly right foot, which needs to have the heel on the floor so it can pivot, with your foot on the gas, as well as you can pivot the foot to the brake pedal without picking your foot up and having to actually literally pick it off the floor and put it back. Pivot that foot right on the floor. These are some of the basics. Your instructor is going to work with you on more of those. When it comes to braking, this is one of the hardest things for new drivers on the track to learn. If we're coming up to a heavy braking zone like turn 1 at Lightning, we might get on the brakes and then get on the harder and then jump off, like you see in the red line. That's not what we want to do. We could jump on the brakes hard and then jump off the brakes equally hard. Also not a good idea. Here's what we want. When we get to the braking zone, we definitely want to get on the brakes quickly, but not jump on the brake pedal. We move our foot quickly and briskly to the brake pedal. We push briskly, but not with a stomp. And as soon as we feel pressure or resistance, now we push as hard as we can. And we do our heavy braking early in the braking zone, and then we can begin to release or relax the brakes and taper off as we turn into a corner. So that graph, if you will, if that helps, that's how we want to use the brakes in a heavy braking zone. The other basic, which your instructor is going to help you with, is situational awareness. This is actually harder for new drivers to learn. So if you're new to DE, you're going to find this the hardest aspect of driving on track if you're like most drivers, because you come to the track expecting to have to learn the line, expecting to have to learn the corner numbers and so on. You may not be expecting that there's other cars on the track that you have to deal with, that there are flags that you need to observe way in advance, that the track conditions can change, and the car's behavior and speed is very different than perhaps you're used to. So all of these things relate to becoming aware of what's going on around us. And if you've had experience on track, you already know what I just said, that this is a big part of the learning curve. Here are the flags. I'm not going to go through them here. You're going to get exactly this information in the track back. And you should study these flags if you're brand new. And in particular, how the yellow flag is used and how the black flag is used. But you should be aware of all these flags and pay a lot of attention. This is just 101 level stuff for driving on track. Passing is the other surprising part. We only allow passing in designated areas and only with a signal. And it means both drivers know exactly what to expect. The car giving the signal, like in the photo, is giving a signal on the left. So they've moved to the right. So there's plenty of room on the left to go by. We use signals so that there is no doubt about what's expected. There's a whole protocol, which again, your instructor will help you with. Here's some questions for those of you who have some experience. Have you ever been surprised by a car in the mirror? Well, if you have, then you're not glancing at that rear view mirror enough. The same thing if there's a train behind. If there's multiple cars, clearly you're not giving pass signals, soon enough or enough of them. Do I actually see the flag station a long time in advance, or do I wait until I'm abreast of it to look at it? We want to look as far ahead as we can to pick up those flags. And do I look at them, especially if I'm busy in traffic? We really need to get in a habit of glancing at every flag station every time it comes up as we go around the track. Do I set up the passing situations to make them easy on me and the car behind? How soon do I recognize an error? These are things, if you've got some experience, you should be asking yourself. If you're new to the track, don't worry about this. These are the things your instructor is going to help you with. And the go, no go, we'll talk about it another time, but that applies if we've made a mistake. We want to have this switch in our head that says, gee, can I continue? Maybe I got into the corner faster than I'm used to. Can I turn the car and get on the gas like I normally do? Or maybe I need to slow down more. That's an example, a simple example of a go, no go, where every time we make a decision on the track, we should be asking ourselves, is everything okay? So I can do what I was planning to, or perhaps things aren't okay and I should, take a corrective action. Again, a whole topic for another day. So in sum, here's the basics that I'd like those of you who are new to the track to take away and spend some attention on: your seating position, your mirrors, learning the line, getting the eyes up and using those glances and that focus in a way that you're aware of what's going on around, but you're at the same time concentrating on where you want the car to be, one or two steps ahead of where you currently are. Using those controls in a smooth manner is really, really important. And again, your instructor is going to help you with that. But, again, we don't want to be in a hurry. We want to be smooth and relaxed in the car. And finally, last but not least, being aware of what's going on around us with traffic, with the track, what the flag stations are telling us, and what the car itself is telling us in terms of the seat of the pants and everything else that we feel. So with that, let me leave you with just one other strong suggestion. Whether you are brand new to Lightning or have been there 5 times, please make sure you've printed out several of the track maps that are on the website for Lightning. This map was designed by Ross Bentley to make it easy to make notes. And so as you're learning the track, and you look at the turn by turn that's going to come up in a minute, you can make notes from the turn by turn and from any videos you watch, before you get to the track. That will help you kind of learn the track if it's new to you. If you've been there before, hopefully you have some notes on track maps from previous events. And if you don't, now is a good time to start making notes of things that you want to remember, whether that's your turn-in point, your anything about the apex, anything about the track surface. The more notes, the better, because as you get more experience, you want more reference points on the track. You want to note the subtleties, which aren't obvious to a new driver, but there are subtleties in the banking and the camber at Lightning, and frankly, at any track you go to, that are really important. And you want to know about those and put them on your map. So when the next time you come back, you don't have to relearn them again. So I can't tell you how important this is. Virtually every pro driver uses maps in lots of ways. And it's one of the most important learning tools when you're on the track. With all of that said, I look forward to seeing you at Lightning. We do hope to have some discussion classes at Lightning, where we will follow up on this material and any other questions that you have, including about the track itself. Look on the schedule for those. We're juggling several things in the schedule, so I'm not quite sure at the moment where those will fit, but we will have those. We hope to have those for every run group to have a discussion section. So with all that said, I look forward to seeing you at Lightning. And right after this, we're going to bridge into a turn-by-turn video of Lightning, which I strongly encourage you to watch, particularly if you've never been to Lightning. But even if you have, if you take the time to watch it, maybe make some notes on the track map, you will no doubt find some ideas and points that you have not heard before, or at least I hope so. And you can note those on your map and then see how it works when you get to Lightning. So with all of that said, I look forward to seeing you at Lightning, and I hope everyone has a great day. All right, so let's talk about Lightning. Normal disclaimer here. I'm going to offer some advice about how to drive it, but use your judgment and listen to your instructor, and be sure to be safe. Don't try anything I suggest here that doesn't seem right to you, or that your instructor doesn't agree with. Passing zones, just as a quick reminder, the front straight and the straight between 1 and 2, passing is on the right. And that's mandatory in all groups, to keep things safe. Between turns 5 and 7, here, this section, early between kind of 5 and 6, the passing is on the right. As you get further down and all the passings on the left, most students find that it's a lot easier to give a pass on the left here than it is on the right, because to give a pass on the right, you have to do it very quickly as you track out before turn 6 shows up. But there it is early on the right, later on the left. The section between turn 7 and 9 is the reverse, right? Early on, we pass on the left immediately after turn 7. Later, and again, the easier passing for most students can be done on the right side, after between 7 and 9. I'm not going to spend any time there. So turn 1 at the end of the front straight, as you can see on the overhead here, it's not really 90 degrees. It's somewhat less than that. Pretty fast corner, uphill, and that modifies what we have to do significantly in this corner. So the turn in is approximately where, if there were a 0 brake marker, where it would be. So if you think about the spacing from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, if you imagine a 0, that's about where the turn in is. The corner is uphill, and that means we have a somewhat earlier turn in and a somewhat later braking point than we would if the corner were flat. But we do have to get turning done early so that we can be straight to go over the hill. And we have to be careful with the gas pedal here, especially in a high-powered car. As we go over the hill, we want to be straight and not full on the gas. And we want to not be all the way track left as we go over the hill to give ourselves some margin. And this corner has been known to eat cars, where people got in too fast or too early, and instead of just driving it off, they tried to keep it on the track, and that's not a good equation. So here's what it looks like from the braking zone. You can see on the left the one brake marker, so we're approaching the end of the braking, but you can clearly see the hill in front of us. You can also tell that from here, while we can see the flag station, right here, we cannot see over the hill. So yes, the apex, which is right about there in the middle of the circle, is visible. The track out is not from this point. And in fact, even as we approach the apex, we can't see track out. And you do see the hill here and the need to get the car straight going over the hill. The other factor here is that pit out is on our right. So cars can be entering. They're obliged to stay track right, but don't let that get your vision upset if you do see a car moving on your right here. That can catch people out if they're not expecting it. So here's the track out now that we're over the hill. You see all the dirt on the left here, where lots of people have driven off. And again, if we can drive off here, and there's a lot of real estate out there, so it's fine if we need to. What we don't want to do is keep the car on the track if it doesn't want to stay on the track. And that's true all the way around any track, including especially lightning. But I use this corner to emphasize that point because it's a corner where a lot of people have made the mistake of being too fast or too early and tried to keep the car on the track. So coming up after turn 1 is the complex of 2, 3, and 4. And these are a series of connected corners that are driven, if you will, backwards. They really, we really kind of think about how to get out of 4, but also because of the configuration, 2 and 3 can be driven as a complex of 1 turn. So what does that mean? Well, really the line between the line through, I should say, turns 2 and 3 is 1 big arc. And the way we make that work is we use an apex in turn 2 here, which is not on the curbing. It's roughly 4 feet or so off of the curbing in 2. And if we do that, we make 1 big arc, one corner out of turns 2 and 3. So that's really important here. And the reason we're doing that is we're lengthening that straight section between turns 1 and 2. Our objective here is to carry as much speed as possible into turn 2 and through as much of turn 3 as we can. We're going to have to slow down for 3 and 4, especially for 4. But since we have to slow down, why don't we carry as much speed as possible through 2 and 3? Some of the reference points here, besides 4 feet off of that curb, the outside curbing of turn 2 really is the turn-in point for turn 3, although it's really just part of the same arc. Sometimes you may have to make a small adjustment of the steering wheel there. And then the apex curbing of turn 3 is, we really want to be on the beginning of that curb, but then off of it, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we're approaching turn 2. We're getting ready to turn in right pretty much where the cone is here. We're approaching the apex at 2 here. This isn't, it makes it look like we're going to hit the curbing here. So this is not the best photo. I need to find a better one for here because it kind of makes it look like we're actually going to be near the curb here, which we don't want to do. What we do want to do as we continue the arc and into turn 3 here is, if you notice this is the apex curbing for turn 3. We want to put the right front tire right on the beginning of this curb here, and then let the car go to mid-track or even left as we get to 4. We don't want to try to force the car in. If we simply make this a continuation of that big arc and let the momentum take us, carry us through turn 3, that's what we want to have happen here. So here we are approaching turn 3. kind of the outside. I don't think I have a photo of it. No, I don't. Let me back up. So the kind of the turn, the point where we are finishing turn 2 at the outside of the track and turning in for 3 is kind of out here. It doesn't show up very well here in the photo. Here's the apex of turn 3, and here's that curb that we want to be on the beginning of. Where the cone is here in this picture, that's not really where we want to be. We want to be in the early part of that curve. And at this point, we're aimed pretty much right at the apex of turn 4. You can't see it very well here, but it's right there in front of in the middle of the screen. So there are 2 approaches to turn 4. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Here I've shown kind of the line that we typically teach, which is we're not trying to stay all the way to the right of the track exiting turn 3. We're not trying to stay all the way over here to the right, but we are trying to end up mid-track, if you will, exiting here, which is what this red line shows on the diagram. So there are really 2 options in turn 4. One is to stay mid-track or the right half of the track and then turn in. Makes turn 4 a little bit easier. And as you're learning the track, for many people, that is easier. But the faster / better line is to ignore the right side of the track and simply exit turn, as we're exiting turn 3, from where the car is right now in this photo, just to aim right at the apex of turn 4, to go straight at the apex and don't worry at all about, trying to be track right to set up for it, which is the opposite of what we would typically do. But the reason that works is that it lets us carry more speed, and there's favorable camber down at that turn 4 apex that lets that work. Now, regardless of which line, some cars require a light brake. Other cars will just be a lift to set up for turn 4. But either way, we're slowing down for 4. 4 is slower than 2 and 3. And as I said, there's good grip at the apex of 4. And there is a lot of track out at 4 that we can take advantage of. So here we are, approaching turn 4, kind of from mid-track on that mid-track line. Here's the apex of 4. Here's the track out, lots of room at 4. This complex is both one of the things that gives a lot of drivers a challenge in learning the track. It's also one of those signature features of Lightning that if you get it right, feels really good. So and again,
hey, Bill,
yeah.
Bill, I had a question. This is John.
Yeah.
So if you needed to do some braking there before 4, would you, at what point and how much, and would you prefer to be on lightly back on the gas as you go past the apex? Like, so where to brake?
Good. That's a great question, John. And so it's going to be in most cars, it's going to be a light to at most moderate brake, and we're not going to want to upset the car dramatically with a stab, with a hard stab of the brakes like we would at the end of the front straight or something. So what that means is we'd want to brake a touch earlier than you might think, but and not really hard, but enough to slow the car down. We can trail into turn 4 a little bit. Again, I said it's a slow corner, so there's no reason we can't trail brake a bit into 4. So to answer your question, I would be on the brakes as soon as I've exited the curbing at 3. As soon as I'm past that curbing, I'd be on whatever amount of brake I needed. Maybe a little bit later than that. The latest would be halfway between that apex curbing of 3 and the apex curbing of 4. And I wouldn't, I wouldn't object to carrying the brakes all the way to about here. I'd be coming off the brakes no later than where the car is in this photo. So the better way to answer your question, or to figure out the answer to your question, is, where do I have to get on the brakes so that I can come off the brake pedal roughly here, just before the apex of 4, so that by the apex of 4, I'm back on some gas or a lot of gas, depending on the car. Because we do want to use the gas exiting 4. There is a short chute here that we want to take advantage of. And so the braking needs to get us slowed down, set up for the corner so we can get on the gas. So somewhere, in that chute between 3 and 4, but so that you can smoothly come off the brakes onto the gas, about where we're looking right now in the photo.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, turn 5. All of you have been there before. You know there's a big hill. That dictates really the line and how we drive this corner, and sets us up. So some comments about turn 5. It's an important corner, but we have to be careful with it. It's important because it leads to a quick section of the track, a long bendy section, but driven like a straight. But the apex is blind over the hill, and we really have to respect that and drive it accordingly, which means we have to get the turning done going up the hill before we go over the hill so that we're straight. And we have to be careful, just like in turn 1, with the amount of power we use going over the hill. And here, unlike turn 1, we want to use the track out, but unlike turn 1 where the road's straight, the road actually comes back here. So there's a lot of moving parts, if you will, for turn 5. So let's see what that looks like. So approaching it, we really want to line up the left side of the car with this curbing that's on the left here. And the turn-in point's pretty much where the cone is, but it's this last red stripe in the curbing here. We want to turn in at that point with the car pretty well straight along the left edge here. And if we do that, then we end up finding ourselves going up the hill here. But again, we're halfway up the hill in this photo. We still can't see the apex. We can finally see the apex when we get at the top of the hill. But it's even, well past the top of the hill when we crest it. One key thing I strongly encourage all drivers, students and advanced drivers to do is put the right side of the car right on the curbing here. I'm not usually a big fan of using a lot of curb, but in this case, it helps straighten this corner out. So put the right side right along the red and white curbing on the apex here, and for 10 feet, at the apex, 5 to 10 feet, whatever. But the point is, use every bit of the road that's there. That makes this corner that much easier and by the way, safer. Now, the track out, if we're not driving, if we're not getting on the gas hard, or if we've taken the corner a little too slowly, we actually have to force ourselves to unwind the wheel and get ourselves out to track left here for track out. But do that because it helps set up the following section. And as you go faster, you have to use all of that track as you come down the hill here. It's a common mistake for students to not use all of the track out here. And it's actually, kind of an easy mistake to make, which is kind of the design of the track kind of entices us to do. Turn 6 is just the kink in the straight there. Turn 7 is a challenging corner for many people, for a lot of reasons. It's absolutely a slow in, fast out corner, but most drivers, wait too late to brake, carry too much brake into the corner, and don't set the corner up properly. The apex here is earlier than you would think, and I'll explain why in a moment, why that works. So one of the things that causes people to brake too late is here is the brake markers are way too late. I don't know why they're set where they are. Maybe a Formula One car could stop in that distance, but the rest of us need to get on the brakes before the brake markers, probably at or before the bridge in most cars, because the braking zone, when we get into it, is downhill, right? So it's not that helpful. And the way we want to drive this corner is slow in, fast out. In fact, the slowest part of this corner should be at turn in, unlike many corners where the slowest part of the corner is halfway or more to the apex. In this corner, we want the slowest point should be at turn in. And the reason for that is, oh, and by the way, the turn in is literally the end of this curbing. So the cone's right where it should be, but the end of the curbing on the right is the turn in point. The apex is relatively early. This cone, if anything, is late for the apex here, but the apex should be, probably the seam between this first red and white stripe here, or maybe even the red. And the reason for that is, it doesn't show up very well in the photo here, but there's favorable camber, in at the apex here. As we get further around the corner, that camber goes unfavorable. And so the fast way to drive this corner, and by the way, the safe way to drive it, is to, slow down, turn in, and then actually, we can actually accelerate a bit, as we move toward the apex. And because of that camber, when we get to the apex, we can actually turn the wheel a touch more and help the car get around the corner while we're accelerating. And when we do that, we end up with lots of room at track out. If we don't do that, we end up with running out of room at track out here, because again, the camber goes away from us. So this is a very tricky corner. It's one that many drivers go off on because they're trying to brake too late for whatever reason, but it is the classic slow in, fast out corner, and one that, teaches, if you will, the benefits of knowing and reading the track surface, knowing and reading what's going on with the camber and such. A lot of that's hard to pick up unless you walk the track, but those are the dynamics in turn 7. And jump in if you have questions, because I just threw a whole bunch of stuff at you. So don't hesitate to jump in. Next up, turn 9, the light bulb or the bowl. There are basically 2 lines through here. I've shown what I call the inside line, which is the line I like to drive and that I typically teach. I'll discuss the other one in a moment. So the way the inside line works is, and I'll show you this in photos in a moment, we aim at the gap in the wall, we brake in a straight line along the right side of the track. I describe it as tossing the car into the banking. We let the momentum of the car just carry us up no more than halfway into the banking. We look around the corner a long ways and gradually wind the car down and squeeze the gas pedal on. The alternative line, some people refer to it as the Miata line, is to enter much closer to track left, make a big arc that's, I guess, slightly decreasing, and try to carry more speed through the corner. I haven't done back-to-back comparisons, so I can't definitively give an answer. I just find that the inside line feels more comfortable to me, and it's the one that I also, in my experiences, found more students are more comfortable with. So what does that look like? Well, here we are approaching the corner, and we can easily see the gap in the wall in front of us, right? The other thing I want to call to your attention is the bright white line almost in front of that along the grass. That is a more or less straight section of the track, or at least a straight section of the white line. And that is a good braking zone. Now, some cars, if you have a lot of horsepower, you have to do quite a bit of braking here. Slower cars, not as much. But whatever amount of braking, this is a good place to do it. And because it is straight. And we can definitely trail brake as we get up into the banking, but we can certainly get whatever the majority of whatever braking we need to do done in that straight line. And this is where we're kind of at the end of that straight line, and we're entering the banking, and we can still slow down, because the banking is going to actually help us slow down. So we can carry a lot more speed into the banking than you might think, and just let the banking slow the car down, because we can't get on the gas for a long time. This is a very long corner. We can't use the gas pedal, to do anything other than balance the car, for a while. So why not carry as much speed as we can safely do up into the banking, let it scrub some speed off, and then pick up the line and move around. Now, the other challenge here is we have to get the eyes all the way around to the right, way off of where this photo is, way beyond where this photo is. We have to be looking almost out the right side window of the car to be looking for the apex at this point. At this photo, we're further around, and I've circled, although it's hard to see in the photo, there's a culvert on the inside of the track here. That is opposite where the apex is, because we can't see the apex cone or the apex curbing for a long time, even from the perspective where the car is here, never mind where it was back here. But we can, if we get our head turned, we can see that culvert, assuming it's not covered up by weeds, which sometimes there's grass or weeds that grow over the culvert. But getting our eyes focused on that tells us where we want the car to end up as we wind our way down the banking toward the apex, and of course then track out. But picking up a reference point so that we can know where to wind the steering down, that's really the key. Once we've gotten the car into the banking here, and even we want to look at that even as we're approaching, just to get our vision. Our glance vision wants to pick that up as soon as we can. So just a quick summary of what we just went through, including some things I'll talk about here at the exit of. Actually, let me do the bottom of this slide first. As we exit the light bulb, we have to be aware, yes, it's a passing zone, but if we give a pass signal, both cars end up a little bit crowded because the track comes back to the right after we go over the hill. The hill that's in front of us here, I should have add a picture here, but we all know there's a hill here, but we also know the track turns right at the at the point of that hill. So if we give a pass signal, both cars, the car on the left is giving the signal especially can easily run out of track. And then there's the issue that pit in is right over the hill on the right. So it's a very crowded section, and it's one that deserves a lot of respect, to pay a lot of attention to as we exit the light bulb and enter the front straight. So the other things I've mentioned around the track, any place, if you run wide, just drive off. Good thing about Lightning is it's a safe track because there's room on the outside of pretty much every corner here. So if you do overcook it and need to drive off, there's plenty of room to drive off. Unlike some tracks, that's not true at Lime Rock. It's not true at Watkins Glen. It is true here. So, drive off if we need to. Turn 5 deserves a lot of respect given the hill that's there. Turn 7 requires more braking than most people think. Most people overdrive it. That's more of an issue for advanced drivers than it is for students, but it does suck us in because it's downhill, the braking marker's in the wrong place, and so on.